Okay, we are recording and start the share. There's so many little steps. Okay, can y'all see my screen? I even have my books, so although they're invisible. Okay.
I have a question real quick.
Go ahead.
So for our quiz this week, will it just be over Tuesday and last Tuesday's material?
Yes, it will be over. Let's see if we can find it. Aristophanes, the clouds, the Republic, and Herodotus, Sappho. I think we'll skip ethics and introduce it next time. So Aristotle's Poetics.
Okay.
In fact, let's start with the Poetics. Well, that's not good. Was the link working for you guys?
No, it didn't work for me.
Okay. So it's not just the hurricane.
It goofed up.
Stuff on the internet lasts forever or 5 minutes, whichever comes first. Okay, so I need PowerPoint.
What is the Snapchat rules?
It's just, the idea behind the internet was to share information quickly, but there was no good way to preserve it. So you have something you use for years and then poof, it's just gone. And that's kind of true for computers in general. Like when I started this, like early on the internet, RM was a big like audio, and nobody uses it anymore. It's all MP3s. Okay, we need a new slide. No, I don't want that slide. Oh my God. Text box. And let's blow this up. And Greek. Okay, so what is this word? It's been a minute, so let's go ahead and work it out. Oh, let's do it over here. So I have an English box and a Greek box. 32. So what's that first letter?
An M.
Yeah. Oh, crap. And the second one?
Is that a U?
No, this one should be easy if it weren't underlined.
A W?
An I.
Yes. Why does it keep doing that?
Oh.
Iota looks pretty close to an I. I seem to have two boxes on top of each other. Okay, slow it down. 32. All right, rest of it.
M?
No, that's not an M. The little m looks like that, the mu. That one is the long E, the eta. All right, next one. Oh, sorry, I missed an M. I'm so stupid today. Okay. So M-I-M-E.
Is that a new after?
This letter here is the one.
Oh, sigma.
Sigma. Very good. And we've had this one before.
I?
Right. And this one looks like itself. The last two kind of look like themselves, right? What's that last letter? Well, what's it look like?
It looks like an S.
It is an S.
Huh.
There are three kinds of S. There's a capital sigma, and then the inter S, the one that's in the middle of the word, and the end of the word looks like a regular S. All right. So what's the English word for mimesis? It is mimesis. We actually use that word. Look at the first four letters. It gives you a clue. Yes,
Are we
Clown.
learning something
yeah,
today?
mime. Let me out of my little box on this computer. So a mime comes from the word mimesis, as does the word imitation, mimetic. And so it is a copying of an action. So what drama does is mimesis. It imitates regular human action. And this is Aristotle's thesis. Now, the thing to know about Aristotle is that everything from him has this. And how's that transliterate?
That's a T,
Right?
E,
Yes.
E?
What's the third one?
Isn't that
Is
a
it an
lamb?
L?
E.
Yeah, lambda. And then the last two should be easy.
OS?
OS. So the only letter that really you can't kind of guess by looking at it is the lambda. Telos is your end or your goal. And for Aristotle, he's very, teleological. He has a teleological philosophy. So Plato is an idealist. In the technical, do we still have a philosophy teacher at Tech? Does anybody know?
I think so. I was supposed to take a philosophy class next quarter, so I'm sure we do.
Let's hope so. Let's hope somebody shows up. And so you'll be learning this stuff if y'all start at the beginning. So idealism in the realm of philosophy is that the ultimate reality is the realm of ideas, and that this reality around us is a manifestation. Aristotle has a more teleological approach to philosophy, which is you look at things in terms of their goal. Here's good. So the master metaphor for Aristotle's philosophy in general is that of the target and the arrow. So the telos of the arrow is the bullseye of the target. Now, what about these targets that do not hit the bullseye? I wonder if there's a way to do. There we go. Okay, this little thing that you see is called a rough braiding mark, and it makes you have an H pronunciation. So our first letter then is H. This is missing the target. What's that first regular letter?
Alpha.
Right. Next.
M,
Right.
alpha, and then it's a row.
Row.
EIA.
Yeah. Harmatia. Which oh, that's lovely. It fits that hamartia, missing the target, would go off the page entirely. In the New Testament, it is a favorite word that is usually translated sin. But sin implies intent. Hold on a minute. I'm sorry, I'm getting hoarse. I don't feel sick. If I suddenly die, then I died of COVID in some creepy hotel room in the middle of a power outage. So, I don't think it hits that quickly. For Aristotle, you intended to hit the bullseye, and you were doing the best you could. You just missed. All right, so the telos of drama, tragedy. Ah, yes. Ooh, where is this? Crap. The letters we don't have are particularly. I need a chart. And they don't all map the keyboard. Ah, there it is. Q. All right, so help me transliterate this word.
K A
Yeah, sorry. Keep going.
T H
Which,
A.
if you were wondering, is the letter Q on your keyboard.
Catharsis.
Yes. And what is the English word for catharsis? It is catharsis. Isn't that great? So what does catharsis mean? It's a purging or purification. If you remember our intro to drama that was written from the perspective of who wrote The Birth of Tragedy? Really, philosopher Nietzsche. He talks about drama taking place against the backdrop of the Dionysian festival. And he talks about the Dionysian versus the Apollonian. So most of our life is lived under the aegis of Apollo, the principle of the individual, responsibility, going through daily life and doing what's expected, maintaining the social order. And the Bacchanalian or the Dionysian overturns that. We merge with the other people. We let loose with these emotions that we have been holding pent up all year, and it lets them out so that we can then go through the rest of the year, fulfilling social order. So it's a pressure valve. Any of you use a pressure cooker ever, or at least you know what one is? So
Yes.
you put this really tight lid and you boil water, and it builds up a lot of pressure in the water. I mean, in the pressure cooker, so that the food cooks faster. You can get a higher temperature than regular water boiling. But what happens if you don't have a pressure valve on the top of that thing?
You're not going to have any pressure.
Well, if you don't, well, either no pressure at all or too much, because there's no vent. So what if you have too much pressure? What does the thing do?
It explodes.
Yes, it explodes. So our society needs a certain amount of crap. Our society needs a certain amount of the Dionysian in order to deal with the things of normal life. And so it can be something really disastrous like a revolution, or if we're smart and build our society cleverly, there will be ways to vent our frustration without exploding the whole society, which is kind of the point of an election, right? Or a football game, or Mardi Gras, or church, depending on your denomination. I grew up middle class, conservative Baptist, and we had very little of the Dionysian going on in our church services, but some of them have it. It's also the word they use for giving people enemas or laxatives, purging the system physically. And this is a psychic purge, where you kind of purge the psyche of these emotions that have been filling up. So with with Aristotle, everything is coming from the telos, so he kind of works backward, or I find it best to work backward if I can figure out how to do this. Okay, let's see. I need an arrow. Would that work? That is a big ass arrow. Can y'all read my catharsis, or do I need to blow that up some?
If you can make it a bit bigger, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so the telos is catharsis. And what is it precisely that achieves of the catharsis? The audience has been moved to fear and pity. The play, the result of the play is that we see the tragedy unfolding in front of us, and we are moved to fear and pity. Pity of the poor person who is in this unfortunate situation, and fear lest it happen to us. And so we go from here with a renewed sense of the need to not have this happen to me, and therefore go back to living a normal life. Now, there's this alternate theory that entertainment, rather than moving us to fear and pity and achieving catharsis so that we go back and live the way we should, it will incite us to act out. We will be. Do you remember Joker, the Batman universe movie that came out about a year ago? They had New York cops sitting outside the movie theater, ready for the riot that Joker Man was going to create, because people are going to go in there, and he's like rising up, man. He's the 99% against the 1%, and he's going to incite people so that they go out and immediately start storming the country. It's going to be pandemonium, I say, pandemonium. And so obviously they are not very Aristotelian in their view of entertainment, more in the line of Plato, right? So if we look at Plato's view of art, and especially of tragedy, what did he say we should do with the poets who write this stuff?
Out, I say.
Yes, yes. Get on down the road. We don't want your kind here, because you incite people to do bad things. Whereas for Aristotle, it's actually a way to keep the lid on most of the time by letting it off just a little ever so often. There's also this theory from Plato that art takes you away from reality, that ultimately reality is the realm of ideas. Remember that chart? And this material world we see around us is R-1. And then if you paint a picture of it or write a song about it, it's R-2. For Aristotle, because it is mimesis, because it is imitating what we see in humanity around us, well, we contrast it with history. we could say tragedy, but we could also say mythology in general, because the tragedies were mythological. Which of the, for him, history gives us particulars. Hey, something's wrong. Here we go. Whereas the myth is universal. History happened to happen that way. If you know, one of the armies had gotten lost on the way to the battle, the course of history would have gone differently. So it's particulars, it's accidents. Whereas a tragedy or mythology is a universal applying to all humans. And so it, instead of taking us away from reality, actually helps us get into reality, understand what the reality of our existence is. Does that make sense? And therefore, it's not only permissible, but necessary. And so what is it that moves us to fear and pity? We need a text box. Ah, very good. Okay, and let's work on this word. What's the first letter?
K.
Yeah, K.
Catastrophe.
Wow, he is getting so fast. And what's the English translation of catastrophe?
With a C.
Catastrophe, but with a C.
Oh, there you go. You're getting on. It's catastrophe. A strophe is a turn, and kata is usually something bad. So a catastrophe is a turn for the worst. Yes, our hero has had a catastrophe befall him. And so that moves us to fear and pity, which achieves catharsis and sends us back into the world. Okay, so your slide. We ran out of room. If we had a chalkboard, this would be easier. Insert. If I could set up a chalkboard behind me, would that work? Like if I had a board, I don't know. Then I'd have to carry it around with me. Although there, some of your finer inn hotels, they probably have like conference rooms that I could get. I should have thought of that. But I was just calling hotels, do you have power? Do you have internet? And this was the first one that did. And I forgot to ask about bed bugs. So, yeah, this word, the thing that leads to the catastrophe is one of these. And what is this? Get me with my letters.
A-L-O-V.
Not V. Why is this all caps? And that's not an O. What's going on here? Ugh. Okay, this is the omega, the long O, and this is a nu. And this is a gamma. These are all, except for the alpha, unusual. And what does the word agon mean?
Competition.
Yes, that's where we get the word agony. But in this case, it's where we get the words protagonist and antagonist. So remember, these plays take place in a competition of their own, an agon, to see who's going to get the best vote and win this year. But they also portray a conflict between a protagonist and an antagonist. And the cast usually was pretty simple. Originally, Thespis had one person on stage. I'm not sure who he was struggling against. But then they would have two people, and eventually three could be talking at once. And, you know, you cycle people on and off the stage. But, yeah. So there's this contest going on, which imitates the contests that people have and imitates the catastrophes that happen to us. So this leads to that. And your protagonist is, it's a human being normally, occasionally a god, as in Prometheus Bound. And it's a noble person. Usually we're talking about a few noble families, elevated, whereas the people that show up in comedies tend to be lower class. Not always, but sometimes and frequently. Is that it? Another thing we should put in here, because it's his theory of tragedy. Anybody familiar with the Aristotelian unities? So for him, because it is mimesis, it is imitating us, then if the play takes an hour to put on inside the world of the play, how long should that take in the external world? How long should it take to put an hour play on? You know, it's a story about something that takes place in an hour.
1 hour?
1 hour, right. Now, most of our dramatic TV that we watch will take place over several days. Like, you know, the cop show, and here's the crime, and then we talk to a few people today, and then boom, it's tonight, and we're getting a good drink, and boom, it's tomorrow. And you may have a whole week, or, you know, 2 days to a week in 1 hour of TV. That breaks the Aristotelian unity. Also, it should take place in one place. So if I walk from this side of the stage over to this side and it's 20 feet, then it should be imitating me walking 20 feet in real life. I shouldn't walk from one side of the stage to the other and say, okay, I've walked from Ruston to New Orleans. And then there should be one event that is the main plot. that unfolds in that hour. So one place, one time, one action. And this became an issue in the 1700s when Aristotle was viewed as the master, as the guy giving the answers to everything, rather than giving his observations and his theories. Remember, he's one of the first philosophers. Maybe the third great one, right? The second one that leaves written stuff behind. And he's at the beginning. And they saw him as giving the final answer. And this is what he does. He goes to the theater, he sits in it, he observes and says, most of these take place in one time, one place, one action. But even then, it wasn't a rule. It wasn't something they all did all the time. Remember the Eumenides. It has 2 scenes in 2 times with 2 actions. It's got the scene at Delphi, and then scene 2 is the trial at Athens. And even the characters change some. You introduce the goddess Athena to play a critical role. So these weren't like, there wasn't a book that they gave playwrights and said, these are the rules you have to follow. This is just how they most happen to do. Also, Shakespeare, how many acts are in your common Shakespeare play?
5.
5, yes. In an average Greek play, it's a 1-act play, but there are 3 of them. So if you want to look at it a little differently, you could say that they're 3-act plays. And in those you have in those 3 different plays, you have 3 different times, often 3 different places, definitely 3 different actions. And if you look at the individual Shakespeare scene, at most there'll be a couple of things going on. Like I'll be the upper class guy standing over here watching a couple of workers do their thing over there. And even then, though, it's kind of complicated because they talk and then I talk. And if we're talking all at once, nobody can understand what's going on. I don't get it. Is it avant-garde? Normally within the scenes, he does observe time, place, and action within each scene. And there usually is one major event in each play. But it's not like he had the book of Aristotle's rules for writing drama and was following them, or even breaking rules. There aren't rules. This is just what he saw when he went to the play. So it's more empirical than prescriptive. Prescriptive, I'm writing the rules that everybody shall follow forever. No, he said this play, and this is what he saw. Does that make sense? Okay, so here we have imitation. Plot must be whole, must be a unity. Also, even he has simple and complex plots. Reversal of situation, recognition, disastrous. Oh, what's the word for that? Catastrophism. Disaster is a bad star in Latin. Catastrophism is a bad star in Greek. But they both give us catastrophes. Okay, I think that's the high points of Poetics. Y'all got any questions? All right, let's see. Let's go back. I need to reset that link. Okay, wrote myself a note. it looks like the whole site went down. That's my big fear of, like it's something they call online digital humanities when they're putting up these big projects, which are intended to last forever. And sometimes they change the URL, but other times whoever was doing it retires and somebody comes along and turns it off. I think we still have the Tech Talk past issues, although they stopped making new ones. What happened to the Tech Talk, or do y'all know? All right, well, let's go on to Sappho. There is actually a Sappho podcast now, so if you're interested in more Sappho, you can look it up. So here we go. When was Sappho? Oh, a contemporary of Alcaeus. Oh yeah, that helps a lot. 5th century? I know Sappho better than I do Alcaeus. 630 to 570. So 150 years after Homer and before, like Aristotle was, I think, in the 300s. So pretty early, and one of Greece's greatest poets, and unique in our class. For what reason? How is she different from everybody else that we will read this quarter?
Is she a girl?
Yes. It was really tough, and it's probably the reason that we have so little of her stuff. She was widely recognized as a genius, but books by Sappho just for some reason did not get copied. Instead, what we have are bits and fragments that are quoted by somebody else in their book as an example of this is how you should do poetry. But really, they did not do a very good job of holding on to Sappho's material. Now, Sappho, as far as I know, is the first love poet. Although she is in the tradition of Hesiod, who said, love the most beautiful of the deathless gods, loosening the limbs and overpowering the wise counsels and plans of all people and all gods in their hearts. So what does Hesiod tell us about love? It makes your legs weak and it makes you act like an idiot. Now, does this hold true for Sappho? Oh, yes. In fact, she uses the same word. Loosening the limbs is lucimeles. And both Hesiod and Sappho use the word. So it seems to have been a common epithet for Eros. Number 2, once upon a time I loved you, Athos, yes, long ago, even when I thought of you as a small and graceless girl. Sappho lived on the island of Lesbos and seems to have had like a school for young women. It's hard to know exactly, but basically the idea is to get them away from a society where they can get around boys until it's time to marry. You want to protect the virginity of your daughter. Fortunately, girl on girl sex was not considered losing your virginity. So Sappho, when when we use the word lesbian today, it's because of Sappho. And Sapphic is usually used to talk about lesbian stuff as well. And there's a debate over how gay she was. The Greeks kind of viewed sexuality a little differently than us, whereas we're real focused on gay versus straight, who you're having sex with. For them, it was how you were having the sex. So whether you were having sex with men or women, if you were a male, you wanted to be performing the part of the male. You wanted to be the one on top, as it were. But other than that, they were, also they were also concerned about whether you were overly involved with sex. So, like, are you doing it to the point that you're unable to continue your other duties? But who you were having sex with was not that big a deal. One reason I don't like the 300, the movie, is it's very homophobic. And if you know anything about Spartan, the way their system worked, it was very homosexual in the way that it was set up. So when you were 10, you were paired with an older dude who's about 20, who would be your mentor, and he's having sex with you performing the part of the woman and him the man. But he's got a 30-year-old guy that's doing the same with him, and the 30-year-old guy has a 40-year-old guy. So it was this kind of, these cohorts of people who had these long-term relationships with each other that were rather gay from our perspective today. I have a beautiful daughter, golden like a flower, my beloved Kleis. For her, in her place, I would not accept the whole of Lydia. Okay, so for honest, I want to die, she said to me. She was in tears when she went away, said to me not once but many times, Sappho, why must we suffer so? It's not by choice. I don't want to leave you here. And this is what I said to answer her, farewell, go in peace, but remember me, don't ever forget how well I took care of you. So the girls are only there until the dad picks a husband for her. And then she gets called back to mainland Greece from the island of women. And does he care if she doesn't want to go? No. It's like, okay, I've got a dude for you, get on back here. And she's like, no, that's not what I want. Okay, number 6. Some there are who say the fairest thing seen on the black earth is an array of horsemen. So I like to see horses and cavalry. Some men marching, some would say ships. So what does Homer write about? He writes about war. He writes about ships and men marching and cavalry on horses. But I say she whom one loves best is the loveliest. So the one I love, that's what I write about. And beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, and what I behold is romantic love. And it's recognizably love. Some people argue that romantic love didn't exist until the Renaissance, but I kind of see it here. All right, in the third stanza, she talks about the Queen of Cyprus. In mythology, when Cronus through Uranus genitals, some landed on the land, some landed in the sea. The sea began boiling and foaming, and out of it was born Aphrodite, who emerged from the sea on the island of Cyprus. So she's called the Cyprian, also the Queen of Cyprus. And it's essential in love poetry that you be pleasing to Aphrodite and to Eros, because they're the ones that are going to help you. Well, here she's praying to Aphrodite on page 230. You, blessed lady, smiling on me out of immortal beauty, asked me what affliction was on me, why I called upon you thus, and what beyond all else I could befall my tortured heart. Whom then would you have persuasion forced to serve desire in your heart? Who is it, Sappho, that hurt you? Though she now escape you, she soon will follow. Though she take not gifts from you, she will give them. Though she love not, yet she will surely love you, even unwilling. So Greeks not real big on consent in their version of love. Love is a disease, a nosos that takes you over and makes you act crazy. And so I will persuade her with my blandishments, and she will fall in love with you, even though she doesn't want to. I mean, have you ever known somebody you really didn't want to be, in love with them, and yet you fell in love, and everything kind of went from there. 12, percussion, salt and honey, a quivering in the thighs. He shakes me all over again. Eros, who cannot be thrown, who stalks on all fours like a beast. So Eros is like an animal that comes on us and makes us like animals as well. Eros makes me shiver again. Number 13, Lucimeles. There we go. Eros, gall and honey, snake slide, invincible. Do you remember? Have you ever heard the phrase omnia, love conquers all? Okay, so what do we usually mean when we say love conquers all?
Like love's the only thing and to cure like violence and whatever is ailing the world.
Yeah, well, it's going to fit. And also, what about all these problems that are facing us as young lovers? Or in my case, really, really old lovers. Like the world puts all these obstacles in our way. What's going to happen?
Love is basically that force that gives you motivation.
Yes, and you will overcome all the...
Her or whatever.
Right. Now, that's exactly, well, it's not exactly the opposite. It's not exactly what Virgil meant when he wrote the words omnia vincit amor. So when he writes omnia vincit amor, love conquers all, the next line is therefore let us yield to love. So love conquers all of us. There are a few select goddesses, Aphrodite, Artemis, Athena, no, not Aphrodite, Artemis, Athena, and Hestia, who are immune to Aphrodite and Eros, but the rest of us are their subjects. Love conquers us all. Therefore, let us yield to love. No matter how much you don't want love to conquer you, it will. And that's very much more the ancient attitude toward love, which saw it as a nosos, a disease. I guess I can put that where it goes. So love is a kind of disease, a pathology that can destroy us. And so your prayers are that that person will love you, but also that don't be so in love that you're destroyed by it. I mean, you saw the pain that comes with love when they were having to leave each other. Yeah, I've got to go do my thing. You've got to stay here and do your thing. We probably won't ever see each other again. Man, tough. So why would you put put yourself in that situation. Well, I didn't want to. I just fell in love. Does that make sense? This different understanding of love than we usually have. All right, we're going to skip ethics today and back this American life. Let's look at Herodotus. Oh, I need Greek. All right, so Herodotus is the father of this. That's what they call him. And what is this?
Hystopia.
What's that first thing, the rough breathing mark? How did we transliterate that?
It's to an age, right?
Yeah, insert text box. Make it 36. The next letter.
Historia, my bad, because it's a row.
Very good. Which gives us our word.
History, maybe?
History, yes. So he invents history as a discipline, as a thing. Most of the narratives we've had, whether they be in the Bible or in Greek stuff, the narratives always had gods mucking about. They were a long time ago, so long that we had kind of lost touch with what was going on. And so we put the gods and the supernatural and, you know, here's Athena, here's Apollo, here's Agamemnon. So it's going to be hard to untangle what we would say are real events from the mythology. And Herodotus removes the gods. So it's part of the philosophical breakthrough, part of the Greek Enlightenment. Which produces philosophy, but it also gives us this different mindset so that I'm not searching for answers from the gods. I'm searching with my intuition and my intellect and sometimes actual investigation, trying to track down sources. And it would be easy to mythologize the Persian War, but and add gods and goddesses and stuff like that, which he does not do. He does have, though, a framework. I spelled it right. Okay, what, pray tell, is a historiography?
Someone who charts history.
A historiographer or a historian. Okay, graphy is the Greek word for writing. So literally it's writing history, but it's a technical term for your theory of history. So I'm gonna go get some more water. I'll be right back. only windmill that runs on water. So every historian who puts pen to paper has a theory of history. What is the driving force behind history? So let's say you are writing the book of one of the books in the Bible. What is your driving theory, history of the driving force of history going to be? What drives history in the Bible?
God.
God, right? And generally speaking, if good things are happening, it's because God likes you. If bad things are happening, it's because he's angry. He smites a lot. Let's take another historian, Karl Marx. Is God the driving force of his history?
No, it's the people, right?
People and our relationship in one major section of a society. What is the thing he focuses on?
Government?
What's that? Well, government serves some other master for him. Okay, so obviously you've been skipping your communism introduction classes. For him, it's all about the dismal science, economics. So why does the government do the things it does? Is it because God tells them to, or is it economic forces driving them? In Karl Marx, it's our economic forces at work that make things happen. So for him, the whole theory about how society works is based on economics. A lot of traditional historians used what's been called the great man theory. And what might that be? It kind of is implied by the very title we give it. How would the great man theory of history work?
Only great men make history?
Yes, great men make history. It's very simple, right? It's a simple explanation. It's powerful. It reduces the number of moving parts we have to keep up with. The great man theory applied to World War II. What do we have to look at to understand what's going on in World War II?
Have to understand what's happening with the great men.
Yes, who would be? Who are the great men of World War II?
Churchill.
Churchill, yes. Roosevelt and Stalin on one side. Who were on the other side?
Mussolini, Hitler, and the Emperor.
Yes, Emperor of Japan, and Tojo, I think, was like his prime minister. So those are the great men. If we can keep up with them, then our work here is done, right? It's a very simple way to keep up with what's going on. But of course, Churchill wasn't Churchill until World War II came along. He was this kind of backbencher who had never gotten anywhere, and it was the forces of World War II that pushed him forward. So there were other things. If you can't get elected, you can't become a great man. And so the things that were going on So Herodotus, in addition to writing about great men, writes about war and also clash of civilizations. So this is a battle between two civilizations. And the Herodotan analysis of Greece versus Persia has survived to this day in the way that we view our conflicts. Okay, so Greece versus Persia. Why would you do that? So Western civilization versus Eastern civilization. And Eastern civilization is older, but so the Greeks would see, or Herodotus encourages the Greeks to see themselves as free. So free citizens. I really don't like the way this is looking. Let's try that. Okay. So here in Greece, especially depending on the polis that you lived in, you have your freedom. And you are a citizen, that is, you are someone who participates in the government versus being subjects. So democracy versus monarchy. The king is it, right? Whereas we have some kind of democracy, even like Sparta, you know, they had kings, but they also had, you know, the military people anyway sat in council, so they had a role in what they did. It wasn't just monarchy where they give orders and you obey. The Greeks saw themselves as being very masculine. Did I spell it right? They saw the Persians as being effeminate. I mean, you know, the Greeks wore manly tunics. The Persians wore pants. Can you imagine a man wearing pants? I mean, just come on, give me a break. What are some of the other things? Oh, Greek versus barbarian. Now, they may be civilized, but they're also barbarians. What for the Greek was the mark of the barbarian?
you weren't Greek.
You weren't Greek and you didn't speak Greek. And so all their words sounded like they were saying bar, 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 and so they were barbarian. So we as Americans can understand this. There's an old joke, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you speak 1 language, you're American. And we have this belief that we can go anywhere in the world and speak English slowly and loudly enough, and people will somehow come to understand what we're trying to say. And it was so powerful that after Rome conquered Greece, instead of the Greeks learning Latin, the Romans learned Greek. You know, I mean, if the Louisiana Purchase had gone the way it should, instead of the Americans, instead of the Louisianans learning English, the Americans should have learned French. That's the way it should have gone. I think that's most of it, but I seem to remember the list being longer at some point. Let's see if I have Herodotus in here. Nope. So against this backdrop, you know, it's a clash of civilizations. And oh, yes, this is more or less precisely the framework that we use, America seeing itself as part of Western civilization, when we have our incessant Middle Eastern wars. And you know, we're going to go over there and spread freedom and liberty and whatever else, because, you know, they are benighted and living under some kind of, you know, despotism. Yeah, and there was a guy, he's dead now, named Ed, I'm stealing this from him. So let me actually quote. It's Edward Said, not said. Orientalism, from the Greek word for the East, Orient, or maybe that's the Latin word. And it's the theory about how people in the East are, so that they are always this way. They're kind of a, there's a cultural ethos to them. Okay. They had him on a lot to talk about our wars with Iraq back in the day before he passed away. Let's see what pages we've got. Syllabus, Herodotus. There we go. So we did the whole thing, 267. This one white. Okay. Okay, so when you've got Swan and Croesus, when in your life can you say that you're happy? And this kind of ties in with Job.
You're successful.
when you're dead. Because what can happen when you're successful? Remember the book of Job.
It all can get ripped from you.
It can be ripped away from you. And so great men, great wealth can make a man no happier than moderate means. And this is actually true. Money can make you happier if you go from being absolutely destitute, living on the street, to being, you got a trailer and a TV and a satellite dish and, a few guns to go hunting deer. That's about as happy as you're ever going to be. After that, if you get a raise, if you come into money, you'll be happier for a few months, and then you'll go back to being as happy as you were before. Also, no man is ever self-sufficient, which is good for us to remember in the when we're debating with libertarians. All right, let's a lot of these, as we move along in other histories, we'll find that other historians remain more focused. He's kind of all over the place with his stories. This is a good story, and I'm not sure. Oh, let's talk about Hippocrates, because it gets us into dating again. Who is our Alcmaeon? Cleisthenes, grandson, had a daughter. So Cleisthenes is, his daughter Agarista is of marriageable age. So whom would you woo in this society when you were wanting to marry Agarista? Like normally, if you find a young woman attractive today, who do you woo? Do you know what the word woo means?
You woo the woman.
Yes, you woo the woman.
Attracting.
You're attracted to her, right? You try to get her to be with you. But who do they woo in this case?
The father?
The father. They woo the father for a year. They're hanging out there, just being, oh my God. I don't know if I could do that. Because they're all sucking up to dad all year, kind of ignore. Did y'all see Romeo plus Juliet, the Claire Danes, Leonardo DiCaprio version of the story? So Romeo, he woos.
I hated that version.
Really? Which one do you like? Do you have a version you like?
I forgot what version it was, but I remember watching the Leonardo DiCaprio version, and I was like, I'm not a fan of this.
It's the one on ecstasy, right? But if we, what about the 60s version, the Olivia de Hussey?
That one I like.
You like that one? If you watch that one, it's like they were all on a weed. Everybody's just kind of, you wonder how you got the energy to fight and to kill people and all. The Romeo plus Juliet. That was the first.
I think it was this Zephyr. I forgot which version it was. I think it was Zephyr. It was from the 60s.
Yeah, that may be one. What was And now I can spell Olivia. Olivia, let's see, Romeo and Juliet. I think this is the one you're talking about. And it's a
Yep,
classic.
that one.
Yeah, Zeffirelli.
Zeffirelli.
So the one from the 90s, though, it was like, wow. And I never really understood why the prince wasn't able to keep the families apart until I saw that, because they, they're basically gangsters, right? They're Renaissance Italian families. They're going to do what they want to do, and nobody's going to get in their way. But Paris, he was the classic traditional way. He comes and he woos the father, and he barely says 2 words to Juliet. Where Romeo, he's climbing up the balcony to a room. That is not the way to do it, at least not the proper way to do it. Okay. So Hippocrates gets the nod from Dad, and then they have a big feast and a lot of drinking. Symposium means drinking together. And what does Hippocrates do at the party? It's kind of a thing that Greeks all through the ages like to do at parties.
The sex.
Well, before the sex, you have to have the dancing. Opa, yeah, you gotta dance. And man, if you look up Greek dances online, boy, they get it. But what special talent does he have that he reveals at the dance? He stands on his hands and, does the handstand. And of course, he's a manly Greek man wearing a tunic. And what happens when you wear a tunic and you do a handstand?
The skirt falls.
Yes, you reveal more than your talents, right? And Dad was not pleased with what he saw. And Hippocrates says, well, Hippocrates doesn't care. Okay. Most of the rest of this is about the war itself. It finally does get to the war. And spoilers, the Greeks win, which they're not supposed to do. But one thing they're able to do is Athens has these silver mines, and they're able to build ships. And not enough to overwhelm the Persians, but they're able to trick them. The way that the Persians won at, what's the one where they all died? Thermopylae? Oh, yes, here we get into the Greek phalanx. Where's a good picture of a phalanx? So the way that the phalanx works, I don't like, this is better. Can you, pitiful. All right, so you hold your shield on your left arm and you have the spear or sword in your right. And that means that my left arm is shielding me and the man next to me. So this way of fighting is quite different from the heroic warfare of I'm going to jump out and swashbuckle around that we see in the Iliad and in most movies, frankly. Here you're fighting as a unit. And they train to dance and train to fight in the same way, because it is kind of a dance that they have to do all together. Is this what they call a line dance, like the kids are doing today? Only with weapons. So it's important that you be coordinated and work together. And you can see how the swashbuckling lone individual out there is very aristocratic and lends itself to a monarchy of some kind, whereas this is a democratic form of fighting, where you have to have enough, money to be able to buy the material, but it's a lot cheaper. A sword and and some armor and a shield are a lot cheaper than a chariot, and so you can be more of an ordinary citizen and do this. And so you fight as a unit, and therefore you go back to the city and govern as a unit. It's the warriors who govern, which is why, in one way or another, which is why they never ask women, because they never let them fight. We barely let them fight now. It's been such a battle to get women in battle. So that means that head on, the unit is very strong. The side is the weak link, especially the right side, because you're carrying your shield on your left arm. And so at the Battle of Thermopylae, there was this perfect situation where you had a cliff on one side going down to the water and a cliff going up on the other. And the Spartan phalanx was just able to stand there. And it kind of didn't matter how many millions of people they had. They could only get a few in that little narrow strip at a time. And they would walk up in their wicker. That was another thing. The Persians, a lot of their battle stuff was made out of wicker, which is handy when it's hot in the desert where they came from. But you go up against Iron Age Greeks, it's not going to work so well. So the weapons were superior, and the tactic was better suited to fighting on the land that they inhabited. So at least in this particular, they probably chose their spot well. And eventually a Greek trader sold out the Spartans and their other allies and led the Persians around to the back. So they got them between two pincers and were able to finally destroy the army. But it was one of those inspiring losses that gained time for the Greeks, and also it's a ringing victory down through history. So the Greeks found out that they had had a traitor, that helped the Persians win. So they sent another traitor that told them this is how you can catch the Athenian navy with its tunic up. But he was a double agent. He wasn't working for the Persians. He was really working for the Greeks. The Greeks. And he led the Persians into a trap, and the navy was destroyed. And all of a sudden, the Persians' biggest asset, that million-man army, becomes their biggest liability. Because what happens when those guys get hungry and they're on a little piddly, peninsula like Greece without a lot of food around for them to eat? You can't feed them, you gotta go home. And so they had to turn back. All right, any questions? Okay, so the quiz this week will be over Aristophanes, Herodotus, Sappho, and Poetics. And then from now on, we'll be a day behind. So next week we'll cover, Tuesday we'll cover Thucydides and ethics. Thursday we'll cover Livy. And then we'll leave the paper due when it's due because I need time to read these. I've got 4 classes with about 100 people, every one of which is turning in a research paper that has to be read. So I like to do that the 9th week of class, read the papers. And usually I can do all of you guys in one night. Usually in the bigger classes, it takes a couple of nights. And so 4 classes, it takes a total of 8 days to get through them. So that's how I stay sane, is just budgeting a certain amount. Okay, I'm going to stick with it until I do it. And then tomorrow I'll do the same thing. But then by week 10, we've got our papers back and you can kind of relax in this class while you study for, your other stuff. You don't want to be writing a research paper the last couple of days. All right, any questions? All right, I will post this recording. Let me go ahead and stop sharing and then stop recording.